Good evening and welcome to another episode of Thought That Get Results. I'm Everett Weber Herbert, and as per usual, we are here every Tuesday evening with something that at least we think is of community interest and or of some concern. And if you think that you have something which fits into that category, you'd like to find out how you can be a part of the program, well, why don't you drop us a line? Address it to the Let's Talk program in care of Vaughan Radio, P.O. Box 195, Charlestown in Nevis. Or give us a call. Our numbers are 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. And by the way, those will be the numbers you'll use to be a part of this evening's discussion. Again, thank you all for joining us. This is your voice in the community, Thought That Get Results. With regard to your participation in the show, we encourage you to call in on the numbers listed 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. Here's a suggestion. You got a question or comment? Perhaps you can get a pencil, piece of paper, write it down so that when you're getting on the show, you're well organized, so that you take as little time as possible and we can accommodate as many of you as we can. We ask only, first of all, you respect yourselves and then respect others, because we'll not accept anything we deem not within our broadcast standards. Again, thank you all for joining us. This is your voice in the community, Thought That Get Results. Tonight, Dr. Patricia Bartlett, good evening.
Good evening, Webo. Good evening to my fellow panelists. Good evening to the entire listening and viewing audiences. Webo, charity begins at home. For too long now, I've been sending, greetings, special greetings to the people abroad, and I've been ignoring my people here. But tonight, I would like to make amends. I would like to just reach out and touch people like Vincent, Raphael, my girlfriend there at that place that they have the yellow bag, people like Muriel, people like Vanessa. And since I would like to then skip over to St. Thomas and give my usual greetings to Anne, Pam, Mr. Martin, and of course over to the UK, my husband right there. And all the people who are listening in the United Kingdom, I know you guys, like I said, and I keep saying time and time again, we appreciate your company so much, because we know you're really making a sacrifice as it relates to your sleep time. We do appreciate it. Thanks for being in our company tonight, Webo. Thanks again for inviting me.
Conrad Nile-Libert, good evening.
Good evening, Webo, and pleasant good evening to your hard-working staff here at Vaughan Radio. To my colleagues around the table, pleasant good evening. I invite everyone in the international circle and otherwise to tune into this wonderful program this evening. I suppose the debate will be quite interesting. I think one of the topics would be the report of the Commission to the Cabinet as it relates to the herb. So that'd be an interesting topic, Webo. But in the midst of all this, I'd like to remind everyone in tune that until they're no longer first-class and second-class citizens of any nation, there will be confusion. So, Webo, with that said, I'm happy to be here, and I look forward to a healthy discussion this evening.
Edric W. Stanley, good evening.
Good evening, Webo. Good evening to my fellow panelists. Good evening to the people of St. Kitts, and more particularly the gracious people of Nevis, those who listen to us every week for entertainment and information on the World Wide Web and throughout the Caribbean Basin. Good evening, Webo.
The Honorable Spencer Brand, good evening.
Good evening, Weber, and good evening to my colleagues around the table. Let me, first of all, Weber, apologize for my absence over the last 2 weeks, certainly due to matters beyond my control. I want to also apologize for the absence of Mr. Hobson. I think he went over to St. Kitts for a function there, so he asked me to offer his apologies to the listeners. Let me say, Weber, a pleasant good evening to all those who are listening and viewing at this time, those here in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis and those further afield. I believe it is always an honor and a privilege for us to come into your homes, into your car, in your workplace, even being a voice next to you on the hospital bed or, in those places. It is certainly a pleasure for us to do that. I want to say, Weber, to those families who are in mourning tonight, certainly want to offer my condolences to at the loss of a loved one, a friend, a colleague. And I hope that they can remember their loved one with fond memories. I believe that it's a journey that we all have to take, and it often behoves us that at some point this is a road that I believe that every single family would have to face at some point. But I want to use this opportunity to offer my condolences to those who are in mourning at this time, to those who are in our various hospitals here in St. Kitts and Nevis, and to those who are seeking medical attention overseas. I really hope that with the assistance of the doctors and certainly with the divine intervention, that they would be made well, they would be made whole and be up and about very shortly, continue to make their contribution. Webo, thank you so much for the invitation, and it is certainly a pleasure for me to be here once again.
The Honorable Spencer Brand, Edric W. Stanley, Conrad Lyon Liber, Dr. Patricia Bartlett, and listeners to this program will know by now that Ted is in charge of Brand and Brand is in charge of Ted, vice versa, right? You know that. So that's the thing about, you know, when you have teams and so on, right? You have what do you call it? I don't want to use cliques, but you have subsections in them. So he's in charge of looking out for Ted. Ted has to give me an account for him, and so on and so forth. Okay. All right. Now, anyway, I note that you know, some of you have indicated you had a couple of things you like to deal with, but I'd just like to bring to the attention of Mr. Honorable Spencer Brand, because somebody late this afternoon gave me something that probably I should raise, and I'm glad that Mr. Brand is here, because I gather he is a requisite representative in the administration for that particular area, just to raise it so that he can get his folks to probably look into it. Now, I'm not suggesting that I want this to become habitual, that people would meet me and, you know, give me stuff and so on and so forth. But what I did, I assessed it, and you know, the person who asked me to do it, Edric is going to probably make a comment at this, but the person was very lovely, so that helped persuade me to do it as well. And it helps, because I always remember in politics, which I'll mention just a little note on the BVI election, which we had last night as well. In politics, I always tell people that one of my you know, great advisors where politics is concerned, Edric Stanley, always tells me that if you're running for elections in politics, it helps to be good looking.
Always.
And so, you know, maybe to persuade me, maybe that helps too. But but anyway, so the issue is that junction at Chickenstone, and the person indicated to me that by their recent count, there were at least 3 fatal accidents. And the accidents could be attributed partly to the blind spot, where we have, I think, a garage in that area, and also the big rock that protrudes, you know, out and so on. And, you know, I think that it probably needs to probably take a look at it. It is a landmark, really. However, we are also getting more modernized, more vehicles, more traffic, and so on and so forth. And so, you know, I think maybe we have to adjust accordingly. And, you know, while we're on that, you can extend it across the island where you have those blind spots or hazards, and also, importantly, a lot of man-made hazards, so to speak, including advertising signs and so on that are going up. I'm pleased to hear that the planning department seemingly are making an effort to sensitize the public. They have a program here now minister it in the mornings. And I have to listen because I'm working at the time. But I'm learning quite a number of things which I didn't know. And so I think it is important. For instance, I realize that you have to get permission for fencing. And you might argue, oh, you fence my own place? But it makes sense because what we find happens a lot of times, especially on corners, people do fencing and do it with blocks or stone, walls. So it again creates a blind spot. And then also, there are a lot of instances, and Mr. Brand has been in the architectural business and so on, and I bet you there are a lot of instances where even sometimes where people actually put down their fences, it's not where really the boundary is. So that they can do, maybe if they did put it exactly where the boundary is, the other public space that was left between their boundary and the road might have alleviated the problem which was created and so on and so forth. So, yes, maybe people obviously want to do as they like, but understand sometimes the issues and the problems that we have as we try to eke out a living where we are, sometimes are created by us. And then we go and we blame somebody and curse somebody. I just wanted to mention that, Mr. Brand, you're the person in planning, I think, and perhaps you can get your people to not just look at it, but also maybe other areas that may fall under the same purview. And it's always good, in my opinion, when we can address a matter when we are not filled with emotions and rancor and being very upset.
Webo, I thank you for that. Thank you. And I want to say thank you to the person who would have raised that matter with you. And thank you for bringing it here to the table. I was at the scene, Webo, of the most recent accident a few weeks ago. And there was a gentleman who was sitting there on a rock, quiet. Obviously he would just finished working from construction, and he was just there. He looked, as most persons were, very downhearted and saddened. And while I was passing, he made a statement that, and I quote, "You all need to take down that old garage around the corner." And we've looked at it, and I want to say to the person who raised the matter and to the general public that we have already begun engaging the property owners to have that old garage removed. We have a number of areas throughout Nevis like that, Webo. One that readily comes to mind is the Big Rock right there in Quaddock Road. When you comes up the road from by down TDC around the corner there, that is one. There is also a kind of blind spot going down into Cotton Ground Village onto the Island Main Road. That is another one. Those are two that readily comes to mind. And those are matters, Webo, that we are seeking to address as quickly as possible. It is really sad and unfortunate that at this particular junction there at Chickenstone, like you said, we would have had 3 fatalities there. And we recognize that it is a problem area, and we have already started conversation with the property owners to have that matter dealt with.
If you know, while we are on that particular, in this particular area, am I correct in suggesting that, putting up fences and so on and so forth requires the permission of the planning department?
Absolutely, Webo, because it is also as a matter of safety for one, as it relates to visibility. As you indicated, some of the fences or property perimeter boundaries that are being constructed are done what we call heavy construction, blocks or stone or masonry and so on. And at times, based on the height and the angle and the distance they are from the road, they create some obstruction, especially around corners. You have some in like school zones, where you have children, children are erratic, children don't necessarily pay too much attention to the traffic and so on. They might just jump out in the road at times. And that is one of the reasons. You also have a situation where you often have some vehicles, because of their height, might have some fancy cars now that is pretty low down on the road and going around corners and so on. They are not often seeing a pedestrian coming around the corner. So they are very, very important that applying to planning would give some guidance as to the height, the possible setbacks, and the kind of materials that can be used to construct these fences. And it's all in a matter of safety and also to protect the property owners as well.
Okay, now I know that some people will always don't want to do things, but some persons are willing to cooperate. Now, can you, in your capacity of the minister in charge of planning, assure the public and those who would want to abide by, the regulations and everything, but sometimes you get bad service and you get a hassle and so on. So can you assure persons that, listen, these are the things that you have to do or we need done so that we can have a better society? So can you assure persons you got to get to planning, but can you ensure that you go there and you're going to get some great service? So not a lot of stress and not a lot of hassle.
Well, I believe I can assure the general public, because that is what we are seeking to provide to the general public. When you think of an entity like the planning department, it's a very, the workers there will tell you, it's a very stressful environment in planning, because kind of matters that they have to deal with their planning are very serious matters, are matters really of life and death, really, in the decision that we make and how we apply the planning laws and the requirements of planning. And if they don't follow those strict and stringent guidelines at time, person might think that, planning have something against them, or government have something against them, or something like that. But it's not really that. We want to make sure that the decisions that planning make are in the best interest of the general public, and also to protect the property owner. And oftentimes, from where I sit, the planning department often try to deliver a professional service. It may not happen at the time when the person may want it to happen, but it often does, because there are things that they have to go through. They have to make certain assessment. They have to look at certain principles and guidelines before they can hand down an approval. And like I said, it's a very stressful environment, and we continue to see how we can strengthen the planning department. I must say that we have just recently employed two young men to look at the electrical side of our plans, an electrical engineer and another young man who are involved in electricity. So these are areas where that we are trying to make sure that we do our best to protect the general public. The kind of requirements now in homes and in buildings are serious, and we want to make sure that when something leaves the planning department, it can stand up to scrutiny and it can stand the test of time.
Well, let me just say it this way, well, the onus must be placed on all people. Chicken Stone is, of course, it's been there for quite some time. Another area that is quite blindly placed is right at the High Court. You're coming out of there, but in a jurisdiction where I've lived before, you are charged with negligent driving. You neglected to look, you neglected to stop, you neglected to pay attention. Here, they charge you with lack of due care and attention. Our traffic has blossomed or ballooned to the extent where we've got an enormous amount of vehicles on the road. And consequently, everybody must begin to drive with a higher degree of safety. You know what's there. There are many accidents that happen on straight roads on Nevis. We've seen them. What do you say to that? Planning can hardly do anything about that. I'm placing the onus or the burden on drivers, cyclists, as the case might be. We have to begin to understand that so many people are on the road now that if you do not pay attention, in the twinkle of an eye, accident will happen. You're coming out of Chickenstone, you know that those buildings, that building is there, therefore you have to come out with due care and attention to ensure that your safety and the public safety, if I were to singularly put it this way, must be adhered to. The planning cannot legislate or even make adjustments. What are you going to do with a straight road where accidents happen all the time? Fellas decide to just drive beyond the speed limit. I mean, we all do take a chance now and then, and we do it. But at the same time, what are you going to do with a straight road where accidents frequently happen? You can't do a thing about it. So the onus must be placed truly on the motorist, the cyclist, and of course we know the rules are pedestrians have the right of way, always. So with the Honorable Spencer Brand looking into the Chickenstone area as to make adjustments and other areas, what are you going to do at the High Court? You're going to take down the wall? When you're coming out of there, you have to move inch by inch by inch.
Okay. Dr. Bartlett, you wanted to weigh in?
Well, not necessarily. Just to support Mr. Brandon, I think people, it's about time that we understood that the planning department is there for a reason. I've heard them, being castigated, because they didn't push through plans that people thought they should get in, And some people have been unfair in the past, but you have to recognize that they have a job to do. And especially women, we're very meticulous and we're going to stick to the rules, and they don't like women in those positions because they can't twist and turn us. And we've had issues there, and to some extent I think that maybe, I dare say that maybe public, safety might have been compromised sometimes. But anyway, I applaud the initiative that they're taking to go around and see where these blind spots are. There are things that could be done. It is unusual to have sleeping policemen on, on a highway or throughway, or, the Island Main Road. But maybe that might be a good place to put, two, if you can't get to move, the barn or the garage. That might be an option. I myself have been toying with the idea. I said I was going to propose it at some time, time in the past. I think I would have said to my husband, there's some places that I feel so uncomfortable, coming down the hill, Brown Hill right there, and I always feel somebody's going to fly off the hill. Because it happened one day, a lady was passing. You can't assume that everybody could drive, because not everybody could drive, I mean, some of us got the license, legally, but not everybody could drive. And sometimes you really have to, put, things in the road, Sometimes, and I say, sometimes these stop signs, people don't use them properly as either. You get to a four-way stop and people coming through when they shouldn't. And for me, you put a sleeping policeman there and they have no choice but to slow down. And I think that might be something that they might want to consider at the top of Government Road as well. There's a box that is there that I frequently see one of the, utilities people, working right there, not calling any names, but I think it is badly placed. You come there and you can't see what's coming from, from the south. And I think that they need to take a look at that as well, So it would be good, and I applaud the effort, and the initiative to go on and see where these problem areas are, because like you said, we have an increase in the volume of traffic nowadays, and we can't assume everybody can drive.
Naya, you wanted to weigh in?
Yes, Bebo, I agree with Mr. Brand. I wouldn't place the onus all on the drivers. Government idea to facilitate the movement of traffic and so forth. These blind corners are contributing factors to accidents. The one at Cotton Ground is always very, 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 you got to watch yourself there. And I think it's that dangerous. And we don't hear of many accidents there because it's that dangerous, and people tend to take that extra amount of care, and that is good. But sometimes we cannot just left it all to the people here in the streets, because, people in Nevis drink. The drunk and the drive, there doesn't seem to have any laws against that.
Of course, yeah.
Well, I'm not sure. Are they implemented? But in Nevis, we never heard of a breathalyzer and these kind of things. I mean, come on, I see it all the time. People stone drunk and driving, don't you see?
Naya, give me a second, I'll come back to you. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Good evening, Webo. Good evening to your panelists.
Good evening.
If I can just add something to what you're speaking of tonight, because it's something that I deal with on a daily basis, and perhaps Mr. Brand, along with the police department, can erect some signs in that area. The Morning Star area, when you come to the point where the road bends to your left as it continues to Gingerland, that intersection has two roads that you can come off of the main road. And so if you're making a right turn there, then you're in a middle lane. The persons on their way from Gingerland coming down don't seem to understand that you have a right to be in that turning lane there. So oftentimes you're sitting facing traffic that's literally coming head on at you. I've asked the police department before to erect some signs there. There needs to be signs. There need to be clear markings on the road, but also signs on the side of the road giving direction of how you can safely make that turn. Quite frankly, perhaps the concentration needs to come out of Charlestown into the other areas around the island to make this happen. It's good to hear what is going to be happening in Chickenstone, because we all know what has happened there, and this is not a first time. So I say congratulations to Mr. Brand and his team, and to the police in joining forces together to keep us safer on the road. Thank you, Webo.
Okay, thank you. Now I need to go back to Naya.
Yes, Webo, I'm surprised that there's laws here as it relates to driving under the influence of alcohol. I mean, I've seen drunken people all the time, white drunken people, and I know in their country they can't do that. Are these laws implemented? I mean, I see accidents and the drivers are drunk and the police never even check them out to realize that they're drunk.
So the police never charge them for drunk driving? The police...
No, well, is there a breathalyzer? You ever see a breathalyzer on Nevis?
Yes, but there are other tests that the police
but
can
let me
do to
ask
charge
you this,
someone for
Naya.
drunk driving.
Why would the police need a breathalyzer if they have the expertise that you have?
Which is what?
You just said that they're stone drunk.
Yeah, but sometimes the police are drunk too. But no, this is a very serious case, Rebel. It is very serious because, I mean, I've seen 1 or 2 accidents coming off the beach with white folks, and, you know, the guys can't help themselves. And they have no fear to jump in the vehicle, jump behind the wheel. In that state, local people do that all the time.
But let me ask you this, though. Not facetiously, but when these events that you witness, are any police around?
Well, not at the time. Police get involved after they've been called, innit?
and the people who will be there, who are drunk.
Yeah,
Okay.
the drivers of these vehicles. You know, I'm not sure what they charge them with, but I mean, if that is implemented, wouldn't you have an instrument to test the level of alcohol in your body?
I
Then and
think,
there?
I think, as Mr. Brand was indicated, there are other tests that you can use, and
Yeah.
one is walking the
Walking
straight line or
Straight
something
line.
like that.
Yeah, and putting your finger, your nose, and all kind of different.
I never see that being done in Nevis at all. If it was...
But that's not the issue, though. I mean, people, there are laws against a lot of things, and people do the things. You know,
Yes,
so
yes,
I don't
yes,
know
yes.
That necessarily is, you know.
Well, it becomes an issue when we have these places that...
No, but the
Oh.
concern is, though, the places that you have blind spots.
Okay, let me just take this. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Hi, good evening, Mr. Hubbard. How are you?
I'm fine.
Okay, good evening to the panelists. This is the young lady that spoke to you this afternoon in Charlestown with regards to the same topic we're having.
Yes.
And I'm just calling to say it's good that, as they would say, great minds think alike. I know everyone has the concern, and it's good to know that Minister Brown and his team is actually working on this. But one of the things we have to think, as Mr. Stanley said, my driving school teacher told me many, many years ago, he said, remember when you drive, you have to always drive for you and the other person. As Dr. Bartley was saying, you can't assume that everyone knows how to drive. Not because a person has the license mean that they're capable of being on the street and driving consciously. So that is a good point that Mr. Stanley made, and I just want to say, thanks for discussing the topic tonight, and it's positive to see that we are moving forward in the right direction.
Okay. You think Mr. Stanley knows you?
I know Mr. Stanley.
Oh.
I teach grade 1.
Yes,
And I think we shared the same jurisdiction once also.
Oh, really?
All right.
All right, thank you.
Good night.
I had made a note here while Mr. Stanley was making his point, and Dr. Bartlett made her point, and so on. And I made a point, a note, because Mrs. Stanley had asked the question, what do you do in certain circumstances, right, Mr. Stanley? And
Straight road.
yes. So, and he was emphasizing that persons should adjust or learn to do certain things or understand that these are how the things are, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, and so my answer and the solution would be take a little bit from you, take a little bit from Mr. Brand, and see whether or not we can solve the problem. Meaning that we will try and emphasize that persons pay attention, understand the rules and the laws, be very cautious. And that perhaps will satisfy the point that you're making and the need. And then we will ask the planning department or the authorities to, where they can, make it a little easier. How about that?
That's a good compromise.
That's fair. Yeah, that's fair. I think that's fair.
Because
Well, let's see if Stanley
says
says fair, because we have to work with him too.
Well, my thing is that we have to look out for one another.
I understand, but what I want,
Yes.
Dr. Bashley said it's a fair compromise. So I just want to know if you being on one end, agree as well.
Not so
I
easy.
like to put the onus on the driver. The persons who are operating vehicles, look, these are deaf machines. They're deaf machines.
So but the compromise you'll go along with.
Let's roll
For
roll
now.
with it.
Okay, all right. Okay, no. Stanley, you're the best, and only the best will do. There's no ifs, no buts, no maybes about that. Okay, so anybody else wanted to contribute? So, Mr. Brand, you'll do what you have to do. And maybe, what we can also do, based on the discussion that we had, maybe we can get some of the folks on planning here, for even if it's a half an hour one of these days, to keep highlighting some things. Because one of the problems I think sometimes it's not that some people don't want to abide by the laws or the rules, but that's why I indicated and asked you, Mr. Brand, whether or not you can assure the public that they'll get good, polite service and so on. So sometimes that has something to do with it.
Absolutely, Weber.
Well, let me just push it a little further. That age group between 18 and 25, there's some air of invincibility in their thinking. And many of us have passed through that phase. A fellow has a motorcycle and it's going at 80, 90, 100 miles an hour. And his objective is to ensure that he gets it to roll on one wheel. Now, so many things could happen, but because he's so skillful, he does his theatrics, he gets away with it, and he continues to do it. There are drivers who've got certain types of cars, and they will drive at a certain rate of speed simply because they think that they're invincible and they can control that speed. Mechanically, if something goes wrong with the vehicle, all of a sudden an accident occurs. So there's a lot to be put into it, a lot to be discussed, and whenever we're going to have a discussion with Mr. Brand and his team, and maybe the police department, they should bring along a few of the young drivers. Because until and unless something happens, they may not get it. I mean, that evening when I came here, I drove very carefully. I came late. And I could see the grimace on your face because I came late. Not in the true sense of the word late. But it was raining, and that accident at Chicken Stone was front and center with reference to my own consciousness. And I said, I'm going to ensure that I take my time to get to the radio station.
You know, what I find is fascinating throughout my life, there's an old country song, and part of the lyric says, and it almost seems as if somebody wrote that song for me, because part of the lyrics says, something always told me they were reading Tommy wrong. Somebody's always reading me and reading me wrong. But good evening, thank you for holding.
A very interesting program. But you know what's so funny? Douglas won his case in the court with the passport. Tell the government that we tax money. Have a good night.
Good evening. Let me get a break. This is Thought That Get Results with Edric W. Stanley, the Honorable Spencer Brand, Conrad Naya Liburn, and Dr. Patricia Bartlett. We'll be back after these.
Builders Paradise is offering a large variety of floor and wall tiles at very competitive prices. They have got over 2 million pieces in stock, lots of different styles to choose from. Whether you're renovating or tiling a new house, Builders Paradise has what you need. Oh, and remember, they are open all day Saturday to serve you better. Builders Paradise, located at CAP Southwell Industrial Park, St. Kitts. Call them today at 466-4938.
When VON vibrates, the whole Caribbean must shake.
860 AM, the Powerhouse.
Back on this episode of Talk That Get Results. Good evening, thank you for holding.
Hello, Weber, and hello to the panel that you have there. Weber, as far as I can hear, you're all speaking there. The only person that's speaking in sense there is Stanley. Now, I'm telling you, Weber, I am sure that these drivers here in Nevis have extra eyes. They pass you around bends. They don't care. They do not take care in driving. Now, Weber, I live abroad for years, and I know that you have to take care. Here, there is so many vehicles, and the drivers them here do not take care. You're on the main road. They're coming out of their yard, coming out of a side road, boom, they pull out in front of you. They cannot wait. They have no time to wait. Now you tell me in Little Nevis, where can't you get in 20 minutes? Where can't you leave home and get to in 20 minutes by taking the time? And there is another thing as well about the automatic car in this island is a killer, because there is a lot of people, especially, I am not knocking Mrs. Bartlett, especially women. They get on the phone and they're doing 5 miles an hour. Now, in big country, you cannot do that. There is a limit on the road. 40 miles an hour? Fine. You can control a vehicle 40 miles an hour. You can brake, if you have decent brake, at 40 miles an hour. They give you a distance that you can brake at 40 miles an hour. Here, these young guys here, like someone says there, 18 to 25, they don't care. They pass the driving test and they think, oh, I've got my license and I can do what I like. Now, whether I live on the road here from Hamilton to Church Ground, and I built my house, and the carpenter says to me, he said, boy, you see that stone wall you have there? Leave it alone. Because these guys came down this road so blasted fast. I'm sorry to swear, but this is what the man says.
Well, you're really sorry? So let's walk with me. Let's don't do it again, okay?
Okay. They came down this road so fast that if you put up a nice concrete wall, brick wall, and they knock it down, it's going to take you years before they fix it. And I leave the wall where it is, and you want to hear those big lorries come down here. Man, when they come down here, they shake the house, carrying stuff, you know? I mean, I know that they have to make a living. But some of these guys, man, it's like a drift. I asked a guy one day, I said, boy, that lorry belongs to you? He working, driving for somebody, because the man stick the lorry coming down the hill in first gear. Well, but you know what the noise it make? What about people with kids, young kids? That kind of, when you drive a heavy vehicle like that and you stick it into first gear coming down the hill, you know the noise it make? You know? So I sit here, lie here, and I love your show. I listen to your show every Tuesday night, as long as it's on. And what Mr. Stanley says, he is the only one that I think speaks sense. Don't laugh at the man. The man speaking sense, because a lot of these people have no time to wait. No time to wait. Everybody got to get where they're going in a hurry. Well, but you haven't got any motorway here. You haven't got any freeway here. The roads in Nevis, sometimes the road is so narrow, and they still wants to pass you on a bend. I wondered if they have X-ray eyes. Good night.
Okay, before you go, could I ask you a question?
Yes.
So you think that Mr. Stanley makes sense? He's got a good point.
Yes. Oh, yes.
But you think also though that some areas are kind of difficult,
yes,
and perhaps we can work with them. So you would agree with the compromise that we made?
Yes, that is true about the bends and the blocks and the big stone and all those bits.
Okay, all right.
That is true.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Okay,
have a nice evening.
Bye.
Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Hi. Good evening, Mr. Weber. I'm calling on the second point from Mr. Stanley with regards to the age, the variance, 18 to 25. And I'm wondering, I'm not certain, but I'm wondering, for insurance purposes for your vehicle, is there extra cost for persons within that age group? I know in the Virgin Islands, anyone that drives a vehicle under the age of 25, even if it's the parent's vehicle, the insurance cost is very high.
Yep.
Yes, that's correct.
And so that is actively happening in Nevis.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Okay.
However, I must bring to the fore the statement we made last week on that topic, which was very thought-provoking. But as I made mention that the lady or ladies who actually joined ISIS should be stripped of their citizenship. But when I made that point, a gentleman called from Atlanta after and said he just heard it on BBC that the British people or British Parliament, British government took the position of denying her citizenship to Britain. So I don't come here willy-nilly. I come here with a certain thought process. And when people may want to poo-poo some of the ideas, I listen very attentively. But let me go on just a little further.
Yeah, well, you're that. Just I'll let you continue. But on that same topic, I'd like to make a correction too, because I started out by saying, when I introduced the topic, that there was this young lady from the United States, and then I was corrected it was Britain. But it was actually true that there was a lady from the United States,
yes,
which I did start the story. But, you know, I'm always, you know, stand to be corrected. But I just wanted to reiterate that there was one. And your president said she's not welcome back either. She's not.
I agree with
So,
I agree with
I know you do.
Yes.
Because you hardly don't agree with him.
That's not true, Emma. That's not true.
Go ahead.
When I was at the waterfront that same Tuesday evening, and a gentleman of note walked up and he said, good evening, Mr. Stanley. I was waiting for the 6 o'clock news from Vaughan Radio. I said, I always listen to this program, the Let's Talk program, every Tuesday night. And it is so sad to see how they gang up on you, but you're always able to knock them over. They didn't say knock them over the barrel, but to...
We just gang up on you?
Not you. Not you. But anyway, it was quite a bit to have heard a comment. Last Tuesday night, I actually went into oblivion. And of course, I got some licks over my back from some of the listeners who told me, what happened to you last Tuesday night? We were listening for you, and you actually, did they throw you off the program? So I said, no. I deliberately stated that I wasn't going to say much, and that's the reason why you didn't hear me. However, let's continue. We have to keep the program very thought-provoking and entertaining for our listeners.
Okay, the other area I wanted to touch on quickly was, as I mentioned, the BVI elections, which took place last night. Now, of course, most people would know I used to live in that jurisdiction. So, and then this is I think the first election of a number of elections that I didn't join the day to, check it out and so on. So I know a number of the persons who normally take part. But the fascinating thing about that election, and it is a small territory like us and so on and so forth, but I always tell folks that somehow there's always, there's never a want for candidates. In these islands, you find it difficult to get people to run. Not there. In one seat, so let's say, as an example, let's say Charlestown, so let's say like they have Road Town, right? We have Charlestown. But I'm not saying specifically which one it was, because I don't remember. But for the one seat, there were 4 candidates running for that one area. Sometimes in other islands, you can hardly find 2. But they had 4 people running for that one seat, and so on. Now, the other thing that was very intriguing about this election is that it is a very challenging time right now for the British Virgin Islands, post the hurricane. And the other thing is that there's been a lot of issues with government spending and so on. And then they have been under close watch by Britain. Because, you know, it's an overseas territory, and some of the other islands, Anguilla and so on and so forth, and they're threatening to take back some of the power that the local government has. And so with all these challenges, and then one of the reasons why pundits will argue that the outgoing government did so poorly is because just before the election, they basically collapsed by their own wounds, self-inflicted wounds. In fact, that's one of the reasons why the elections was called that early, because they were fragmenting, and they hardly could find a majority. And since the election was close by, the premier decided, well, just as cheap and so on. But what I found was interesting about the result is that that party, which the outgoing party, had took over from the party that just won, which was in power for about 3 or 4 terms. And so they took over, and then within 2 terms, they self-destruct. And so this other party is now back in power again. So it is just interesting to see how the cycle basically just continues. And so at least 3 of the candidates who were of the ruling party, the one that was ousted, including the leader, lost his seat. And at least 3 or 4 of them who I know were real seasoned politicians, and they couldn't even win their seat. So when I look at these things, I begin to assess and then learn how when people get fed up with you, you don't stand a chance the next time around. I was talking to a friend of mine about a week before the elections, and I said, well, who's going to win? What is look? He said, boy, I have no idea this time around. And he said to me that he said to me, I always hear about this, but I experienced it literally this time. He said, yesterday, they came by my house, and that's exactly 4 years since I saw them. 4 years. They had never come. They have always dodged them, don't answer their phone, and so on and so forth. And so they came and they were calling him.
In this game.
And I wanted to give him a little advice. Tell him go. And then listen. And then when they're leaving, just politely say, okay, see you again the next 4 years. And I believe that should give them the message. But these things happen all the time.
But there are people who are genuine as leaders, and they will always win their seat. They will always win their seat.
So once you lose, you're not genuine.
You got hard choices, but you have to come clean with the people. And if you have hard choices and you tell them the truth, they will still rally with you. This is how I feel, Weber. You tell them the truth, you show them the evidence, and they will still roll with you.
But what if someone were to argue that people don't really want to hear the truth?
True, that is quite true. There are times that people just don't want to hear the truth. But that doesn't mean you should tell them a lie.
So if you don't...
They will come to find out that you have been genuine. I look at the Honorable Vance Amry. I think he could have gone on into perpetuity in that seat. That's how I feel. And I don't see anybody in the Caribbean that would fall into that category of the Honorable and
Dr. Bradley, let me ask you a question.
Until later on, we'll see.
Let me ask you a question, Dr. Bradley. I noticed you chuckled when Mr. Stanley made the comment about the truth and stuff like that. So I was just curious, why? Do you know, for instance, of a group of people who don't?
Well, all I say is you and I live here.
Okay.
And I think your perception is just as good as mine.
Okay.
Or probably even better.
So anyway, it is interesting when you look at what's happening and the way people react to the politicians and so on and so forth. Because when I look and examine all these different scenarios, including the one in Venezuela, because see what is happening. You're headed for, well, already involved in a civil war. And you have one leader on one hand he doesn't care how many people die. Which is very sad. And as a matter of fact, they showed this little video with him dancing. And people hurt him. And he just wants to make sure he holds on. The other fellow, he wants to make sure he takes over. And just people keep dying.
Well, I've got that on my list.
Okay, well, go ahead. Let me take the break and then I'll come back with your list.
Yes.
This is Thought That Get Results with Edric W. Stanley, the Honorable Spencer Brand, Conrad Naya Library, Dr. Patricia Bartlett. Your phone calls on 1-869-469-1616 and or 1700. We'll be back after these.
With all the power from the tower, this is the powerhouse of the Eastern Caribbean, VON Radio, from the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis.
Back on this episode of Thought That Get Results. So let's go back to Mr. Stanley.
Yes, it is quite fitting to hear that P.J. Patterson and Owen Arthur and Dr. Kenny Anthony and the like who have decided to intervene in Venezuela's politics, as the case might be. And of course, we have had Dr. Timothy Harris and the Honorable Premier Mark Brantley who went, and I hope they are on the same page with reference to telling Maduro the time has come for him to give up power and ensure that the people of Venezuela are looked after and hence become a humanitarian. Because ultimately, he's got to go. Ultimately, he's got to go. So why make the people suffer? And I don't believe that there will be a U.S. intervention in Venezuela militarily. I don't believe it. No. In Grenada didn't have any oil, but yet Ronald Reagan ensured that communism, socialism did not catch root in Grenada. As a result, Grenada is still a democratic or a free country, and thus we are hoping that the same thing would occur in Venezuela. Guaido is there, and I'm hoping that ultimately, little by little, people would begin to understand that he is the type of leader who should take power and ultimately lead his people onto bigger and better things, a brighter future. Part of the military has now decided to jump ship, and depending on the size of the military that will jump ship,
that is the key.
We know that Maduro has to go. The people are suffering. Why should people be suffering? I love life, and I'm certain all of these leaders, they love life. Just the other day I saw something with one of the dictators in the Union of Socialist Republics. And he ensured that he put all the doctors in jail. And one time when he took sick, there was none to take care of him, so he died. And I hope some of these dictators would take that as a lesson.
But he is, that don't make sense, because if you put all the doctors in jail and you take sick, you know where they are?
You go for them.
They go for them, or you go there.
Well,
that don't make sense?
Well, yeah, he wouldn't have gotten any attention because he felt that there was a conspiracy against the regime, and consequently, he ensured that he put all of them in jail. So he would not have gotten any attention, and therefore he died. Webo.
Naya, go ahead.
It looks like the war for political systems or of political systems continue while people are dying. Historically, it's always been like that, and you wonder why. To advance one political ideology takes precedence over the life of people, and sometimes that's a bad situation, Webo. A bad situation. I mean, what is going on in Venezuela, from my point of view, it's a war to advance political ideology, and the people get caught up in the crossfire. In the past, we know about Cuba and the things we have heard about Cuba back then. Today, we see Cuba as a leading nation here in the Caribbean, and most countries are dealing with Cuba and have citizens in Cuba being trained and being schooled and having medical care there in Cuba. So sometimes I wish, Webo, that we can lift our minds above political ideology and advance to the needs of the people, instead of, because in all this conflict, the media plays a great role, as it did during the days of the revolution in Cuba. And I think today we have realized it was not all wrong. It was not all bad, because we are so dependent on that little island today. And so the situation down in Venezuela, one would hope that something can be resolved. But it's really not comforting to know that it is that political ideological war that is taking place, why things cannot be resolved. Of course, people have pride, and for some reason people hold on to what they think is right. And of course, yes, Mr. Stanley said he don't think America would intervene. Did you say that on
militarily?
Militarily. I personally won't bet that at all. You know, I mean, you've said it. There's oil in Venezuela. There was nothing in Grenada other than Cuba, and of course Russia indirectly making huge investments that had such intentions in Grenada. So I can only say, Webo, that the situation is really bad. It's really bad. I think the people have been hyped up by the media and by those who wants to see their ideology triumph. And so the situation continued to get worse. Where it's going to stop, it just might have to come to an American military intervention there, Webo.
I don't think that it would happen. I agree with Mr. Stanley in that I don't think that America would dare do it. They're not the only ones who think that they're a superpower, you know, and I don't think they're ready to take on Putin. Having said that, though, I still don't see how democratic it is for a man who was not elected by the people to decide that I am going to take over. That is not democracy either.
It's not.
So I don't understand who in their right mind could support that. That is where the contention started. There was an election. You didn't want to participate, so how you know you're going to come? I'm like, participate and then complain while you're participating, but participate. You can't not participate in the process and then at the end of it you come and decide that you want to, take over power. I could never support that. I could never support the fact that they want to just push this, because the aid that they're trying to push into America, if you look at the breakdown of it, because I saw, the breakdown of it, and it is just a paltry, it's just a token. You're telling me that you're going to send enough food that you can sustain 7,500 people for 10 days. That's like 75. Let's say that you were going to use that same food and everybody, who you could give it to for one day. That is just 75,000 people, you couldn't feed in one day. You're talking about a place that has, 3.5 million people would have left. So you still have another, that is 30 million they have there, 28 point something, my maths ain't so good. 26.5 million left, right? 26.5 million left. That is just not, that's a token. You can't feed, you can't make a difference. So if that is the aid that you're trying to get in there and trying to cause confusion over and putting people's life at risk for that, why not use that for the 3.5 people who would have left already? They need support, even more so than the people who are there.
Okay, just let me take this. Dr. Bartlett, I'll come back to you, sorry. Thank you for holding. Good evening.
Hey, Weber. What's here, right? You think this right? A man from Zimbaland got to a health center in town.
Enjoy your evening. Go ahead, Dr. Bartlett.
So the aid, for my part, having looked at it, at that aid that they have been offering, it doesn't go anywhere into making a difference. In the overall scope of things, and I think that someone would have coined it very well last time that they're looking at an excuse to get into Venezuela, but it's not going to happen. Look at what is going on in Haiti. The situation in Haiti is not any much better, except that the people of Haiti are forced to stay where they are. They can't go anywhere, so nobody's reaching out to them. They're asking, they want to remove their leader as well. But I'm not seeing anybody going in there to help them. Things are pretty bad there. You have more poor people in Haiti than you have in Venezuela. You don't see anybody going to try to relieve those people there. But I don't know if it depends on the hue of your skin. But I don't see that kind of intervention, and it's not being talked about, if you can only read it in certain media, But for the most part, if you're going to just watch TV, you're going to get a view that is going to be pushed on you. That is an American view. And that is the unfortunate thing sometimes when I hear people try to debate issues. They're not reading, not looking at the data, the raw data that's coming out, and all people get emotional about things because we've been fed through the American media for so long now that everything that we see on TV, we seem to think it is gospel. And that is so unfortunate.
Not everybody look at TV and come to a conclusion that what is on TV is totally correct. People with a certain level of intelligence can deduce, can see and make recommendations. Sometimes those recommendations may not even get through. But sometimes some people jump to conclusion as if that's the only medium through which one can come up with ideas. But if you are at a certain level of thinking, you would always understand, and if you understand history, which some of you have admitted that you don't like history, and consequently you would never...
Don't get it on tonight. Do not get personal, Stanley. It's about time you...
I'm just saying, let me...
Don't get personal. You don't need to get personal.
You had your share, you had your time, you spoke.
No, you don't need to get personal.
I'm just saying to you that you don't have to look only at what's on television.
But that's what you're getting your media. That's where you're getting your information from, and we understand that.
They are there simply because, on the one hand, they're the first that went into independence, but these people have not been given the opportunity, or they have not taken the opportunity to educate themselves. They believe in all kinds of things which have kept them down to the extent where they're suffering over a large or a long period of time. Haiti doesn't have much, but at the same time, if the leaders who are the same race practically understand their responsibility to their citizenry, they would be able to govern in a manner to lift Haiti out of ignorance and poverty. So don't think that everything is done or said on television and people swallow it hook, line, and sinker. There are some of us who are intelligent enough to write the script and to make recommendations to see if we could energize or influence a certain way of life, certain other people's thinking. So Haiti, on the one hand, that's a basket case, but they've had enough time in terms of leadership. There are rich people in Haiti, wealthy people in Haiti.
You're missing the point, though.
And as a result,
you're missing the point. The fundamental point is
can lead Haiti out of its misery and poverty, but they have chosen not to.
Oh dear. I think you're missing the fundamental point, Mr. Starley.
Never have.
The point is, you have a people who are suffering, and there's nothing being done about it. You have a people, on the other hand, who are suffering, but you're concentrating on those people. Why? Why the disparity? Why aren't we paying attention to Haiti as well? Why do we want to create in Venezuela a civil war? Why do we want to go there? Just because, like Naya said, ideologically they're different? That's no justification for it. There's no justification for it.
I know there are a lot of...
And I'm not asking you to see it the way I see it. I'm just saying we see it differently. But I don't think it is fair what they're doing to the people of Venezuela. They're forcing these people out. They're making the place unstable. And America has a lot to pay for, because they're the ones who are instigating the whole thing.
There are a lot of intervention
humanitarian
in Haiti,
aid, trying to get humanitarian
not only from
aid.
the United States.
Give it to the people who are leaving, who need something. They need something. The people who don't want to leave, you facilitate them.
The thing is that some people are so myopic that they cannot see the danger or the damage they're doing to their own selves and to the people and to the country, and that the time has come for them to, in fact, make a practical decision as to how to get your people and country upward and onward. But because of selfishness, greed, the hunger for power, they will continue to mislead the people.
Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Yeah, what's here, right?
But you see, the hunger for power is not just resident in Venezuela and Haiti. We have it here too. Wherever you find politicians, you have hunger for power. Yes? So if we agree that some states operate differently than others, then we have respect for other people's sovereignty. Let them work out their story inside there. If we're going to give the Venezuela people help when they come out, let us help them. There are right now countries that are extending help, humanitarian help to the people who would have left, Venezuela. That's what we need to do. The people are in a bad state, but don't try to egg on people and try to destabilize a man's country. What do you expect him to do? Of course, we're the ones who are causing, as far as I'm concerned, America is responsible for the humanitarian crisis that you have going on in Venezuela today. Why don't they do the same thing to Haiti?
There have been intervention in Haiti, not only from the United States, but I guarantee you from many other nations throughout the world.
I don't see them carrying out humanitarian aid. Why do they take it? Okay, if they can't get it into Venezuela, okay, divert it, send it to Haiti then. What you want to cause unrest, the people place for?
Based on the last report, it might be misleading, but it's some $100 million US worth of aid that is awaiting to get into Venezuela. And that is just the first step.
$100 million buys you $3 a person.
You can do the math today.
It buys you $3 a person.
And just leave the math there as if that is into perpetuity. But that's not true. The objective is to at least bring stability to the country.
Who is trying to stabilize it? With what?
Maduro has to go.
Oh, please.
And I do not know what message
people leader from outside.
Prime Minister Harris and Premier Brantley and Mayor Martley brought back from Venezuela. But with the intervention of these other elder statesmen from our region, they are on the same page with reference to ensure that the Venezuelan people should no longer suffer under Maduro, and they're trying to mediate a situation. And this is one of the reasons why I said, even before I heard of them, of their going there, I said I do not see a military intervention by the United States. But now these other elder statesmen from our region are attempting to find some way of mediating the situation and to reduce the level of suffering to the people of Venezuela. And what you're saying is that who wants to leave, leave. And leave the tyrant there to ensure that what he does to his people would be acceptable. It is unacceptable. There are many countries right now that, from a democratic point of view, even though you said about democracy in the country was elected democratically, there is democracy without tool. And in that regard, there are countries lining up to help the Venezuelan people. And they're telling Maduro, the time has come for you to...
But they're out of place.
They're not out of place.
They're out of place, Stanley. You want somebody to come here and tell Timothy Harris that he has to go? No, that can't happen.
Timothy's not
So what
that
happened?
way.
What
You
happened?
can't,
So
you
what
can't-
happens,
you can't
Stanley?
mix apples and oranges.
Mr. Stanley, we're not mixing apples and oranges.
Sure, because why
You're
you
drawing
gonna
a
bring,
parallel.
Timothy-
What happens if tomorrow morning Douglas decide, well, I'm going to take over here? Huh? I'm going to take over. Timothy Harris must go.
How is he going
and they start to try to destabilize the place. How are you going to react?
How is he going to take over? He can't take over. How is he going to take over?
Well, how you have a man in Venezuela who wasn't elected by the people who are taking over?
Look, we are not, you cannot compare apples and oranges.
Well,
and that's exactly what
how
you're
is
doing.
that comparing apples to
You are saying
oranges?
that if Douglas decides to take over.
Because it's the opposition, that's what it is. The
No,
opposition as the opposition.
It's not on the horizon. And based on what we know here, it can't happen.
What do you mean it can't happen?
It can't happen.
If America were
It
to
can't
decide,
happen.
if America were to decide that that is their chosen person who they want to lead for whatever reason, and they put their support behind him, it could happen, because that is what is happening in Venezuela.
Based on what?
Pure and simple interference in Venezuela.
No, that's not true.
And imposing sanction to try to force him out. No other legitimate reason for imposing sanction on the man. No other legitimate reason.
Creating that atmosphere
Yes.
of doubt and
Yeah,
hardship
yes,
and then
and of course, if people get
yeah.
people are gonna get angry. They get hungry. They get angry.
People are
creating
hungry.
that atmosphere.
What they're doing is inhumane. What they're doing to the
CIA is
people of
in their
Venezuela,
lifetime.
because they're not. And in the meantime, they're cutting aid. They're cutting aid. U.S. has cut aid in the last budget.
Look.
For the aid that would have been going to refugees, they have cut that by 95. No, I'm sorry, not 95. 98%. 98%. So it means you're leaving. Whatever they're giving you now, don't think it's going to be anything continuous. Don't be fooled, Mr. Stanley. It's not.
Look,
because it's not budgeted for.
You shouldn't be looking for aid if you're a rich country. You shouldn't be expecting aid if you're a rich country.
What are you talking
Venezuela and Maduro said our country is rich. So if the country is rich, why are the people starving?
Remove the sanctions.
Remove
The sanctions are what have
Figure it
Venezuela
out.
in the position they're in now.
Okay,
having
good
the
evening.
capacity
Thank you
to-
for
to
holding.
figure it out.
Hello?
Yes, you're on the air. Could you go ahead?
Hello?
You're on the air. Could you go ahead?
Yes. Good night, Rebel. And good night to your panel.
Good night.
I agree with what Mrs. Bartlett is saying. I mean, I don't know if Africa have oil, but to me, when I listen to the news, even on the 700 Club, and they're criticizing Maduro them, it seems as though it's just the oil that they're after. Is the oil. I'm sorry that the people them have to be suffering like that. But as the lady said here on the panel, that just like how they're putting in the food in there and receiving it. I mean, look after them really who are done out there. How you going to just get somebody to go and jump in and take over the gentleman? You know, just try him out. You know, that put to me, you go right back to that put me in the mind of Kennedy Alphonse Simmons. Good night. Thanks for listening to me.
Hello.
Hello?
Good evening. That put you in the mind of who?
So Kennedy Alphonse Simmons, when he did get over so with the 15 years government.
He did?
Huh?
He did?
Yeah, you didn't hear. You don't hear. Patches Petty clip with Douglas.
No. What?
Huh?
What? So who overthrew him?
You never hear Dr. Douglas say he overthrew the 15-year-old government in St. Kitts.
No.
Yes, the Patches played Thursday night for you, and he will play it.
So he got overthrown? He got overthrown?
Yeah, Douglas said he overthrew him. So he overthrew him because he threw him out. All of us was down the government headquarters when that happened that day.
You too?
Yes, I was down there.
What you were down there doing?
Politics, you know.
What you were down there doing?
I was down there with my Prime Minister. Everybody who back him was down there looking out for him.
Who is your Prime Minister? Was your Prime Minister?
When Sir Kennedy Alphonse Simmons was the Prime Minister, and I will go down there. I will go down there with Mr. Harris this year too.
Yeah?
Yeah, I love my government, you know.
You love your government?
Unity government.
Okay.
Okay, thank you for listening to me.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Mm. You know, you might think that is funny, but that's very important because it puts a perspective on the discussion that you've been having. And what that does, it puts into the whole discussion the actual people, because that's what you get. People, elder statesmen, younger statesmen, governments and presidents and so on can say one thing. But from the ordinary people, it's quite another.
Well, I hope that the people don't rise up. I hope that Maduro quits before the people rise up against him. Because ultimately, these are the two forces that are going to collide.
But you will agree. You would agree. When you said the people, you're talking about two sets.
Two sides.
Quite so. Quite so.
You know? So when you say the people will rise up against him, you mean one set?
Well, obviously.
Okay.
A certain amount of pressure would...
So if one set rise up against you, you have one set, right?
Right, there are two sets of people.
Right, and so that's why...
The country is divided.
That's why you have the impasse.
True, and ultimately you would have one side... It's like a seesaw. One side is going to overpower the other. And I do not see Maduro surviving.
Why?
Simply because the lack of food, the lack of proper medicine, and the quality of life has deteriorated to the extent where the people are going to rise up against Maduro. And he's supposed to be able to see it and become a humanitarian and just go into exile. Whatever money he got, let some other country take him or go to another country with whatever money you got and let the country be freed of your governance.
But if we just spoke about two sets of people, well, if Maduro is sent into exile, will his people go with him?
No.
Okay. So will they be satisfied? If he is sent into exile, they remain, will they all of a sudden become converts and then go on the other side?
It doesn't happen overnight, Webo.
Okay.
It's a process. And in that regard, once Maduro leaves, and we have seen it happen over and over throughout the world.
Well, what if someone asks you to look at the flip side and says, what's the other gentleman's name?
Guaido.
Yeah,
Guaido. Yeah.
once he leaves?
Everything settled in, maybe.
Right.
And the U.S. removed the
And
sanctions.
remove the sanctions on themselves.
Well,
You see, CIA has been in Venezuela for a long time. America doesn't go public until they've been in there for a long, long time, just like they did in Bolivia and other South American countries. And they have gathered their friends and fuel a situation that create what we're experiencing and hearing about today.
America is all over the world.
Instability.
Because America is the world's policeman. She's the richest country in the world. She has the most firepower in the world. And technologically, she has been advanced. She has advanced herself into the world where they're stealing from her. And therefore, she has been leading the world.
As a bully. As a bully.
And therefore, people have to understand the quality of life in the United States is better than the quality of life in many, many, many parts of the world. People are breaking down the doors. Where
you get your Sally, where you getting your information from? Huh? You need to look at the data that is being produced. They have, you go to the UN site and you see day to day, America is not leading in a lot of
the most homeless people I ever seen.
Most of the quality of life parameters that are being measured, America does not rank in the first 10. So I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm just saying.
You don't know what you're saying.
You don't understand
I don't understand what.
You don't understand.
You need to be able to look at the data sets that are available and stop just watching TV.
No, not
because American TV feed you a kind of thing to make you think. America is not leading in most of the parameters that they think related to your human index.
Look, I'm not saying it's leading in every.
But you're saying how the quality of life in America, this and that.
It is.
Stanley, but you said they will lead it. They said they will a leader, but that is not true. Stop misinforming people.
Okay, let me just take this. Let me just take this. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening, Webo. Good evening to your panelists.
Good evening.
Mr. Stanley.
Yes,
good
sir.
evening.
Good evening.
There's those statements you just made. They need to be. It's time that you reassess those statements. America is leading the world. America just had a president installed by a foreign power, and they're seeking to do the same thing in Venezuela. How could you be supporting that kind of thing? That's not democracy.
Let's take it one at a time.
So Guaido, or whatever his name is, he didn't run in an election. How could you be supporting saying that if there were irregularities in the Venezuelan election, they need to have another election and get.
But that was requested.
I'm waiting to get to that.
That was requested, but it was prevented.
Stanley, you cannot be supporting forcing this man into power when he didn't win an election.
Based on the information
is that how it's done? So you mean to tell me the last election we had, we could have had somebody else in power here in Nevis or even in the Federation?
Based on the election that we have had, it was free and fair, and the opposition did not contest it.
Well, the last federal
all right,
election
but
we had.
Guaido stated and the opposition in Venezuela.
The man in charge flee the post. You mean to tell me that we could have decided to put somebody else in?
The man in charge flee the post.
Yes.
Simply because he knew he lost. If you're talking about George.
Yes.
So he knew he lost, and therefore he quit.
He knew he lost, but did you know that he lost?
But everybody knew it was.
Mr. Stanley, speak for yourself.
I know he lost.
Okay, well then.
He quit. He left this post before the election was over.
Were you counting the votes?
I was right here at Van Radio, and the votes were coming in, and we knew. So he lost, and
Mr.
therefore
Stanley, we're still a democratic nation. We have to wait and see things through in the proper way. Two wrongs don't make a right.
Well, it's like
in as much as the people are suffering, you cannot just go and install anybody willy-nilly just because they said they declare themselves How they could have declared themselves the president when they didn't even take part in an election?
Because the election was supposedly rigged, he decided not to. But it's the process.
But the
This is
election rigged
the
all over the
process.
world.
This is the process. Meaning, if pressure is brought to bear
that is all it said here.
on Maduro, where because the people are not getting adequate food, adequate medical care,
Mr. Stanley,
and ultimately he has to go.
We could make all the excuses. You do not bring pressure to bear on anybody. It's supposed to be democracy, and there's a process that should be followed.
So,
and if there were irregularities, you redo the election. Redo the election.
He had an opportunity to redo the election, and did he?
Let Guaido take it to court. Not Donald Trump decide, America decide who should be in power, and when they didn't even take part in an election. They're ulterior motives. I have a feeling, how come they haven't gone into Haiti? How come they haven't gone into Haiti? People asking, but they're not answering the question. Haiti don't have any oil.
Haiti doesn't have any oil.
Right, Haiti doesn't have any oil.
They have been in Haiti. They have been in Haiti. I mean, based on what I know, Bill Clinton and another organization, many organizations, not only from the United States, but from other countries of the world, are in Haiti.
The Clinton charity, you mean?
And also, the United Nations have been in Haiti for a long time. That's what I know. No, I can't tell you why Haiti is still on its knees. When I say that, I know that one, the people are not as educated as they should be.
Until America do things the proper way, we'll always have. You seem to think that America is some superpower. Not anymore. America don't on their knees when it comes to the Japanese.
Who is the superpower in the world? Currently.
Beg your pardon?
Which country is the superpower in the world currently?
You look to me like China right now.
China is not there yet.
You see all the nonsense Donald Trump doing to try to counter, because China is way ahead of them.
No, China is stealing their secrets.
Listen, Mr. Stanley, if you check in America, you find there's a bulk of shipping containers that are in America coming out of China and Japan. And they doesn't have a thing to send back to them, so they stored up in America. Right now they're trying to figure out what to do with them. The balance of trade is coming this way, not going that way.
But China's GDP is roughly maybe $6 trillion when the United States GDP is 16 trillion. I have two books. When I get off here, come by me and I'll show you.
Mr. Stanley.
All right?
Mr. Stanley.
I'll show you.
So
don't mislead people to think that China is up there. It's going to take China the next 100 years to overtake the United States.
Stanley may know what book you have. That book probably would have been printed years ago.
Just a minute, Mr. Stanley.
All right? That's not true,
China
Stanley.
is heavily indebted to America. Sorry, America is heavily indebted to China. And when you talk about superpower, that little short fella in Korea have more power than Donald Trump, but he's only as I say, bully. He wouldn't admit it. A lot of things going on, and he wouldn't admit. Anyway, check your facts again.
No, I've already checked my facts. I could tell you the short fella in North Korea, he doesn't have the firepower as the United States has.
Oh.
But then everybody's stealing. Oh. If everybody's stealing what I have, if everybody coming to my door to steal what I have, what does that tell you? What does that tell you?
He doesn't have much left.
It tells you that they're concerned. They want to know exactly what you have.
R&D, research and development.
And would you allow them to know what you have, Mr. Stanley?
You don't have to allow them to know. They will eventually figure it out, and they're coming, and that's exactly what's been happening.
Mr. Stanley, America is in the habit of saying that they know when they don't know.
Look, one of the big things is that the labor movement never went east into China. Look at the low wage being paid in China as compared to that of the United States.
That's what China used. That's what China used to get ahead of America. Right now,
it's not ahead.
They're leading. They're leading.
Anyway, let's leave that debate for another time.
All around the world, right? China's building, forging linkages and stuff.
Sure.
Donald Trump busy building walls. Where does that make sense?
Well, you know why he's building walls? People truly want to come in.
That's when you're afraid of your own shadow.
No.
Yes.
No.
That's when you're afraid of your own shadow, Mr. Stan.
You have any wrought iron on your house, windows and doors?
No. We haven't come to that yet.
Okay.
I don't have anything. I don't have anything for anybody to come for.
Okay, but you know some people do, and as a result, the reason why they do is to keep out those who are coming to take. But what I'm saying to you, when you look at the size of the United States in terms of physical space, the United States is a larger country than China. The population in China is much larger than that of the United States.
Does that qualify them? Does that qualify them to have a bigger trade, a better trade?
Yeah. Okay, caller.
Okay, sir.
All right, thank you. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Good evening to you, Weber.
Yes.
And good evening to your heavyweights and your listeners home and abroad.
Good evening.
My family and neighbor Pat seems to be giving Mr. Stanley, my dear friend, some body blows tonight. Stanley is on the defensive. So, Stanley, hear how I'm going to defend you. It comes down to interests. This is the United States' third border. And it's not that I am defending them. For instance, if you look at Eastern Europe, you see what Russia would have done in terms of Crimea. They tell the West, not here, you know. And they move in. And they set up a barrier so NATO will not cross. And so Crimea will not go back to where it came from, because Russia believe it is in their best interest for them to do that. However, when I look at the humanitarian scene that I am seeing coming out of Venezuela, I just don't like to see it. It is obvious, very obvious, that people down there and the poorest of people are the ones who are suffering. Yep. And I believe instead of a military solution, you must have a diplomatic solution. Good evening.
Good evening.
Well, based on what the gentleman has just said, it adds to the point. We understand that the United States has plenty. And again, there are leaders, bad leaders. Trump is a bad leader. And he has not taken certain critical positions in a forceful way to demonstrate the United States' power. As a matter of fact, he has been working against the interest of the United States. But sadly, his time will come to an end.
Who will be next president?
Now, based on what is happening,
Nancy Pelosi should take over?
Trump should have confronted Putin when Putin flew those two jets into Venezuela.
Is his friend?
Because he's stupid.
Is his friend?
And he has been hoodwinked by Putin. And because he has his own interest wanting to make money out of Russia, he has abandoned the interest of the United States of America. But his tenure will be short-lived. And the United States will assert its rights. NATO, which has been brought in since maybe 1949, as the case may be, 45 at the end of the war, was brought in to ensure that this alliance protects the member of the alliance. But Trump has given away the trump card by saying NATO is no longer relevant. But Putin is afraid of NATO.
Really?
He's afraid of NATO. With the backing of the United States, they can take on Putin. the other Baltic states, they are looking still to the United States for protection. Putin wants to prove to the people of Russia that he can rebuild the Union of Soviets of Socialist Republics. And depending on who is in Washington, it could be prevented. But if he takes a back seat and allows Putin to manipulate him, which the evidence is clear, Putin would march forward, and Putin already said, look, I'm coming at you in the West. You cannot just retreat. You have to go forward and fight the war geopolitically. You cannot allow Putin to claim territories that he didn't have before. You have to strengthen the alliance, and through that, the strength of that alliance, you can tell Putin, you cannot win. Famous quote from Ronald Reagan to Gorbachev. A nuclear war cannot be won, hence it must not be fought. So, with that, we have to change the leadership in Washington, and I rest my case.
Well, change it there first before you try to change it in Venezuela. I agree with you, Stanley. You and I agree on one thing tonight. We have to change. But Bran wanted to make a point.
Yeah, the discussion is very interesting, but I believe that all of us are on the table, and a number of the callers recognize that it certainly would be a futile venture in Venezuela if it turns out to be a military situation. I believe we have quite a number of entities, OAS, CARICOM, the EU. I think that there is also a Canadian effort to try and bring about a peaceful solution to the situation in Venezuela. One of the critical elements of all of this, I feel, is the matter of free and fair elections in Venezuela. Whether that will happen, that's a different matter, that's a different story. There's always been this cloud in Venezuela, and to some extent in places like Cuba as well, about the legitimacy of the elections. With this one-party system, and certain political parties and organizations are just not allowed to participate in the process. I think that this time around in Venezuela, we have seen a number of persons who would have rose up to say that this is enough. But I believe, Weber, that the situation would have gotten out of hand so quickly that I believe that after the last election, I don't think that a lot of other territories was really paying attention in Venezuela as to what was going on in Venezuela. I believe that it caught a lot of people off guard, and the situation have gotten to some extent out of hand, that they are now trying to put this genie back in the box. But with how much million? 10 million, 20 million? I don't believe
100 million.
Whatever the number is, but I don't believe, Webo, that there would be a military solution to this situation in Venezuela.
All right. Now, maybe let me just go on to something else quickly. Naya, let me take this first. Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Well,
yes.
I don't agree with Mr. Stanley here, that Putin is afraid of anyone, China, the United States, France, England, and Russia. They are all superpowers. However, it appears as though it has come down to China, the United States, and Russia. I don't know what reading Mr. Stanley is doing, but China is advocating up to today in the news that they have invincible nuclear weapons that can reach anywhere, any part of the world, in minutes and turn countries into ashes. We don't want that. We don't want that. You're talking about doomsday. So it has nothing to do with being afraid of who is afraid of who. All of those countries have weapons of mass destruction, Mr. Stanley. So none of them is afraid of each other. And so we cannot go there, Mr. Stanley. They have to negotiate. They must set up memorandum of understanding, or else none of us would exist.
But caller,
one of us.
Reagan said it.
Caller,
Mr. Stanley, yeah.
the problem we are having now is that the U.S. is walking away from a lot of these treaties that I believe would have kept some of these advancement in military advancement. How do you counteract that?
Well, you see, what I will simply say is that when you have change in administration and different ideology when it comes to politics, I believe that is what is happening here right now. But even if they're walking away from that, I believe you must find a way out, because what you're hearing is very dangerous rhetoric.
Exactly.
Coming from both Russia and the United States, which is frightening. It is very, very, very frightening. You know, hearing what is happening between India and Pakistan. What could that trigger off? I mean, the world is at its most dangerous time ever, I believe, where we may be facing a third world war. And I will only hope that these superpowered leaders will realize what they're up to. None of them can win. So there's nothing to be about afraid and disafraid of that, Mr. Stanley.
No, the thing is that it cannot be won, so therefore it must not be fought.
That is true, but you're talking about Russia being afraid. That's what I picked up.
Well, what I'm saying to you, once the alliance is intact, Russia would never attempt to be as bold as it is now.
Mr. Stanley, you're not reading.
But Trump is trying to destroy the NATO.
Have a good evening.
Thank you very much. This might be a light moment, Mr. Stanley, but the caller just implied you and something like Trump, because he said you're not reading.
Well, that's not true. I mean, he says that. You understand? He should come to my library and see the books I have in my library.
But Trump said he had a lot of books.
Well, that's Trump's
and when they asked him, he said, well, I love to read, but I don't read.
Well, he admits that, but I would never admit that, because I have a library with all kinds of books. You understand?
Yeah, they need updating.
And therefore, I know I read, and in that regard, nobody's going to tell me. I write also. And I could write some of the books. You understand me? So, based on where we are, I am saying to you.
When you say you could write some of the books, you mean some of the books that you have?
No, Weber, you have thoughts. I'm a thinking man. And because I'm a thinking man, I have ideas, and I understand people. I understand governance. I understand wealth, power. I understand a lot of things. And in that regard, I can pen what I know. I can pen based on my own creativity. You understand?
I'm listening.
So, if I were to run the world, these flashpoints, I got Crimea and India and Pakistan on my list. You've got Iran. I mean, I could remember when Iran was out there trying to stir up trouble. Obama already gave my cousin.
Yeah, but stick with you.
Yeah, I'm just saying to you, in that regard, that these are flashpoints around the world. You got Syria, Iran, India and Pakistan, North Korea, South Korea, and we understand all the dynamics. But what people need to understand is that we all are human beings and we want to live. And in that regard, we must seek an avenue where peace should be abound and ultimately allow human beings to exist in peace and tranquility.
But you begin that comment by saying, if you were to run the world.
Yeah.
And that's what you, after that you disconnected me.
What I'm saying is, you just apply certain fundamental principles. And if everybody accepts the fact that we want to live, then those principles would prevail.
But Mr. Stein, that's the problem. A lot of people are not accepting, quote unquote, some of those fundamental principles.
You know what the problem is?
They accept them, but they sometimes want to cheat and thinking that nobody else is looking.
The problem is you have too many men, you know, in control of countries. Too many men. So it's this high level of testosterone. It's just about fighting. It's about combat. It's about power, you know, and it's not about addressing the needs of the people, you know.
But what happens to women who got a lot of testosterone?
We don't have many of those who are in power, I would imagine. We need people who could, you know, calm things down and, you know, do things and put, you know, put policies in place that would keep the peace, you know, not spend your money. Your poor country, your people are suffering. Like North Korea, we know they have develop missiles and stuff like that, and you have people who are suffering. So instead money go into developing the people, money going into all these arms, you know, and we need more women, you know, to be able to pull things back, you know. We're too close to World War III, like you said. We don't need that. We need humanitarian, you know, gestures, you know, extending relief here and there where it is needed. We need to be able to reposition wealth around the world, you know, and alleviate the suffering of a lot of people, you know, in various corners of the world. You know, instead of that, we have, you know, men who are just vying for power. You know, they would mash up a whole country just to be in power. You know, nobody's going to back down because it's all about power. It's not about the suffering of the people. And then you have people who are going to interfere on the other hand. And instead of trying to help people, they're going to interfere and say, you can't get access to your resources. Let your people suffer instead because you should not be in power. Yeah, you can't live like that.
Good evening. Thank you for holding.
Well, I just called back to make a quick correction because I did mention the name of China, which China, I said China said they have supersonic speed nuclear weapons.
Russia.
It was Russia who said that. And they can launch them from submarines, which can only take 5 minutes to reach any target in the United States.
Sure.
And they said that they are invincible. They said nothing can see them.
Listen.
Absolutely nothing.
We understand that, but they're not the only ones who got it.
Stanley. So when I tell you to go read and you're talking about all the books you have, I like what I tell you, you know.
Yeah, well.
Why Stanley love you, see, because, you know, you have a way in countering things and coming back. Stanley, you have a good one.
You also.
Yes, you too. Yes.
Well, like I said, you cannot allow somebody to just go along and think that they are the bad man around. And I know the United States, it has its faults, it has its ills, but it's still the greatest power on earth. It will probably take another 200 years before it begins to falter. Little by little, they all gang up to try to take down the United States. They come, they steal. She gives to the world. Open arms. And if you are generous and you give and you give and you give, there are people who die as paupers because they've been so philanthropic that they gave away. And when time came, they had nothing left for themselves. But the Lord Almighty, of course, still provides. We as human beings, we have to look at the sanctity of life. We must enjoy and love life to the extent we do not try to destroy anybody else's. And that is the point I'm trying to make.
Yep, so elect women from now on. Just let us focus on electing women who are going to pursue the peace. Men are just trouble. All you're going to get is just fighting for power at the expense of people.
That's the last word. This program repeats tomorrow at 10 o'clock following the VON News Minute. Join the Honorable Mark Brantley tomorrow evening at 8 for On Demand. Thank you all again for joining us. This is your voice in the community, thought that get results. You all have a wonderful evening.
views and opinions expressed on the preceding program